Welcome, everybody. Episode 214 of Winners and Losers Show. I'm joined by my new best friend. Just kidding. Sorry, Scott. Make it awkward off the bat. It's Scott Bennett.
Hey, I'm happy to be that. That's a nice title. Thank you.
How about a potential best friend? What an awkward.
Absolutely.
What an awful way to ruin what's supposed to be a pleasant moment. Let's make them pay on Substack, TikTok, YouTube. Go like and subscribe. Tap the buttons and support him. I first came across Scott's through work through TikTok. Really educational. It's not just the wall of books behind him. It's also the knowledge in his head and his videos, and really strong, succinct, well-written explainers. I don't want to, hopefully, Scott, I'm describing you accurately as an anti-capitalist, or do you have a label you
absolutely
like to throw at yourself?
I absolutely identify as an anti-capitalist, for
sure. Yeah. I've encountered, and by the way, thank you. You're like my first stranger reach out. I had, maybe in the years past I've had strangers on the show, but like it's been a long time since I booked a stranger to come on. So breaking out of some comfort zones, and you've been real cool in booking and so thank you for that.
Well, I'm delighted to be on your show. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. That's awesome. So I'll be mining flattery from Scott the entire time about the project. I forced him to look at the trailer for the documentary. I mean, people on my channels are very familiar with me rambling about.
And Hank, I gotta apologize right off the top for Tiki. My bird is right outside my office. I'm sure people hear him in my videos all the time, and he loves to start singing when I start talking. It's just
okay.
So he's if you hear him chipping in, he's always going to add his 2 cents.
All right, let's put a camera on Tiki. Let's get Tiki going. Come on, we'll do a 3. No, what kind of bird is it?
We can do it later. I'll mess up my shot on the camera here.
Oh no, don't show it. I was kind of kidding. Yeah, no, I meant like a whole third like 3-way call. Not. Don't move your camera. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of bird? What are we talking here?
He's a cockatiel.
Yes.
So basically an Australian pigeon. They're Australia's version of a pigeon, from what I understand.
Oh.
And they flock all over the place, but they're very colorful. He's got a really pretty little bird, he's got yellow feathers and a pretty yellow crest on the top of his head and 2 rosy red cheeks.
Okay.
And my wife and I have taught him a whole bunch of songs, and he can say a few things. He can say, "What a good bird, what a baby bird," and he whistles the whistle stop song from Robin Hood.
Hell yeah.
And he's got all sorts of other little tricks that he does.
Yeah.
Very talented baby bird.
Wonderful. Buying this bird was a mistake would be like a funny thing for a bird to say, wouldn't it? Just if it hears that enough.
My wife just released him, and he is flying around the kitchen now.
I see him going by. That's awesome. That's cool. My neighbor has a macaw blend between the yellow, blue, and the red one. So he's this beautiful red neighbor bird that I've known. His name is Myron. He goes, "Hello," when you come walking up. So
I find those a little intimidating. Oh, here he is. Here's my little friend.
What a
baby bird.
What a good little bird. Like and subscribe. That's great. That's good. I think it takes a special person to have a bird. I love the pet. Sometimes I had a cat and I could barely handle the sweet, beautiful little cat.
We have 2 cats also in addition to our bird.
Yeah.
And one of the cats is very interested in Tiki and would really like to meet him up close.
Oh, no. Yeah.
In his mouth.
Right. I got it. Yeah. And then, and his whole digestive tract. That's I can see that
absolutely.
Being, interesting. Okay. So, all right. We've met your family. That's really cool. And so anyway, all right, let's get to the interview. I don't know. We're having a conversation. So you're, I came to kind of my political posture. I've sort of landed on the phrase or on the term anti-capitalist. I wasn't really, I wasn't raised with any kind of, I guess I was raised ambiently conservative with like a dad who loved Reagan and hated the Democrats but also kind of like thought people who were too into Rush Limbaugh were a bit overboard. So I wasn't fully into the deep part of the stew here in this country, but I just kind of, and then I like sort of started thinking for myself in my teen years and was like, this is bullshit. This conservative shit's kind of stupid, but I didn't really ever dial into leftist sort of Well, and I jumped way ahead, but like, and into my 20s, I sort of would have called myself a progressive. Might still use that label here and there occasionally, but also I think labels are prisons, so they tend to be,
Yeah,
I think,
sure.
pretty
I get
confining.
it.
But so I suppose liberal and then progressive, and then I was more interested, and that's where eventually that's like kind of why I was into the Young Turks from a very early stage.
Yeah.
They called themselves the Homo Progressives in 2006, 2007 was when I first started watching, way back in the earliest time on YouTube. I was
Wow.
an early adopter of podcasting, and I didn't really get radicalized. And I don't even know, maybe we could even talk about that later, is that what does it even mean to get radicalized? But like, I just didn't have the exposure to the history and the like, I had the disposition to be a leftist of a sort, but I didn't have the exposure to someone like maybe yourself. If we were friends in our 20s, you would have told me some stuff, or I'm just, somebody who might have known more, and I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, what the fuck, this capitalism shit's bullshit, man. It's such a scam. And then you learn more about colonialism and the origins of all that, and the slave trade, and this, and America's history, and this whole project of just mugging the planet so that some rich assholes can like fulfill their deeply wounded childhood trauma, undeveloped bodies and emotional
That's
systems
about the size of it. Yeah.
in order
Yeah.
to
Um,
win contests with each
I can
other about who
relate to
can buy
that.
more
Um,
Lexuses. So where did you get your dispositions, and how did you arrive at where you are now? Sorry for the long question.
no, that's okay. I mean, yeah, it gave me a little time to think about it,
Yeah.
formulate an answer because, mine was not a short path either. I grew up my dad was more of a Democrat, but he was very mistrustful and always disappointed in the Democrats. And he would talk about third parties all the time when I was a kid. And he would say when I was a kid that what this country needs is a revolution. And that was just what I grew up hearing all the time. And I really took it to heart. And I didn't know to think any different, but so it wasn't. I wasn't a red diaper baby, what they call them. Kids like Ralph Nader, whose parents were communist, and he grew up, like learning all this stuff about class power and everything. So my path was more like I remember in college, I went to University of Michigan, and we would read Noam Chomsky in class, and I would be like, this guy hates America.
Yeah.
And that was my first reaction to Chomsky. I felt very resentful about the things he was saying, and I was like, geez, that's so unfair. And I grew up just like everybody else, propagandized to believe in the free enterprise and the free market and how great capitalism is. And I internalized it as a kid and didn't think anything about it. I'm growing up in the 80s,
Yeah.
in the Reagan era, and GI Joe, and I was not questioning any of that. And then after I graduated, one thing that holds true through my whole life is I'm an anti-authoritarian to the core. I've always hated authority. I remember junior high school, we had a vice principal who was a real hard ass about our school uniforms at the Catholic school and would hound students. And I had so much resentment about that. And it's carried through ever since, that I can't stand petty dictators. I hate it. I hate people who throw their power around. I have a beach not far from where I live, and the lifeguards, they're just drunk with power. They look for reasons to yell at everybody, and it just drives me crazy. And I reflexively just hate that. And so during the George W. Bush era, after I graduated college, I graduated in 2001. I was very critical of everything that Bush was doing, but very much in the mainline liberal complaint mode. And but I always read a lot. I was always reading a lot of I was always trying to find outside of the mainstream type of thinking. And I came back around to Chomsky. I have a good friend, and we would always have 3-hour long conversations on the phone, and I started reading more Chomsky, more Parenti, and along the way, after college, I was thinking I would like to write a book. I didn't know what I wanted to write about, but I always remember when my dad said about third parties, and I was like, maybe that's an answer. So that was kind of the genesis of me writing my book. And so that's when I really started reading Noam Chomsky and Michael Parenti and Howard Zinn very seriously, and building up a knowledge base based on what they said. And I learned a lot from them. I consider Chomsky and Parenti to be my other dads, because I learned so much from them. And I think they're such great role models for being on the left and being a real critic of capitalism. And so I didn't grow up, I didn't come up radicalized with the Communist Manifesto and reading Marx and reading Lenin and all that. That only came much, much later. And I still struggle with it. It's not easy for me to parse that kind of material, like the 10 days of the revolution, or 8 days of the Russian Revolution, the blow by blow for the 1918. I couldn't read it. It was so hard for me to get through. I just had to put it down because I just couldn't figure it out. So
Okay.
I'm a little weak on the orthodoxy about Marxism stuff, but I come at it from a genuine place of this whole political economic system. It's all part of the same thing. You can't change the government without changing the economy. You can't change any of the important stuff without looking at the class structure and starting to cope with that and starting to rearrange that. So, because I feel like the two-party system is just designed to frustrate change and stop change. And I think, and so over time, I wrote my book thinking about third parties, but the more time goes on, the less and less faith I have in that kind of thing, because, third parties, it's still working within this system. You're still working within this rigged electoral system. You're still working within this rigged economic system. And while it's possible to make changes, it ends up being more of a reform versus revolution kind of thing. And I just, if we want change, we got to have some kind of revolution. And I just don't see the electoral path like I did when I was younger. It seems more and more impossible to me as time goes on.
Yeah, that's absolutely a huge conversation currently, right on the left, within at least the should you even support any kind of democratic position as a voter, or only support third parties, or like you're saying, that's still kind of participating. I sort of see the two-party system as we currently have it as terrible, obviously, but as an apathy generator. Like, you're only offered two horrible choices, Biden, Trump,
Right.
and you pick the one that's less evil. I think I kind of follow, okay, I don't see it as an expression of your personal virtue. I see it as one of very many small ways that you can do something on a day that might slightly improve things. So I kind of come down on not being so against not voting within the system as it currently is, but I still don't think that's going to do anything. I consider women dying in hospitals parking lots because they can't, doctor will get, is afraid of, getting arrested. And we can probably slow that down slightly with Democrats.
Laws passed, all the abortion laws being passed right now, it's just making things so much worse on a human level than anything they're trying to fix. It's just, it's bananas to me.
And a revolution is obviously called for. What the fuck? Why is any government building standing? I don't know if you're allowed to say it on YouTube, but in a society where the people are ostensibly in charge, we are fed to the soul chipper of corporations, just the healthcare industry, the health insurance system of they kill tens of thousands of people every single year, so I sort of look
multiple 9/11s worth of death happening because of our healthcare system, for sure.
Within us talking this conversation, people will die.
It's just it's the fact that we're conditioned to believe that that our votes matter so much and that our votes can change things, and it just the more solidified and fortified the campaign finance system becomes. You talk about things like Citizen United. You talk about things like even going back to Buckley versus Vallejo in the 70s, and it's just money runs the system, and money is where the power is in our political economic system, and it's not with the voters. And the voters are only given two choices. You have the Republican Party, which is 100% committed to giving capitalists everything they want. And then you have the Democratic Party, which Kevin Phillips has called the second most enthusiastic capitalist party on earth. And they're also committed to giving business what it wants. But they also, they have this very old brand identity about being the working man's party that goes back to the 30s, right? And they haven't been that party since the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're still coasting along on that brand identity, but they won't do anything for the public that's going to threaten capitalism. Right. So, and all the changes that we need are perceived as gigantic threats to capitalism. You talk about changing the healthcare system. Well, that would be a huge threat to capitalist profits for all of the giant vested interests who make money off of our healthcare system. And the same goes down the line for so many serious issues that we cope with. But one of the biggest ones would be worker power. And I know this is your wheelhouse. You talk about unions. The Democratic Party used to be the party of unions. And ever since the 70s, they take the unions' money, but they don't do anything for the unions. And I did a post a while back about Taft-Hartley, a law that was passed in the late 40s, and how it outlawed all of the most effective tactics that labor was using to generate the highest union membership in American history during that period. And sit-down strikes and sympathy strikes and all these effective tactics were outlawed, made against the law. So talk about tying labor's hands behind its back. And that passed over Harry Truman's veto, but the Democrats have been in power plenty since that time. And if they really wanted to help workers, then they could repeal that law. It doesn't have to be this way. Yeah. And they always sit there and say, oh, it's Joe Manchin's fault or it's Joe Lieberman's fault. There's always some scapegoat who's a big, mean centrist, kind of sitting between the two parties who won't play nice. And they blame him, or they blame some other phenomenon. Like the most hilarious one was the Senate.
The parliamentarian.
What was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
What a joke.
No-name bureaucrat that just decides it's not allowed.
It's that mean old parliamentarian. His rules won't let us pass meaningful laws for the people. So it's a joke. The two-party system has us all locked up. And one of my favorite books I ever read was about it was this book right here.
All right.
The Populist Moment by Lawrence Goodwin. And this talks about the Populist Party, the People's Party, back around late 1800s, when we talk about Cross of Gold and William Jennings Bryan and all that. Basically,
Thomas Frank wrote about this too, right? Recently,
Yes, he did. Okay. He wrote a great book about it that people know. I highly recommend it. I love Thomas Frank.
Okay.
But I mean, it's a perfect example. The farmers were getting radicalized, and they were fed up with the two-party system, and they were out there. These farmers were out there talking radical ideas about socialism, about moving in a socialist direction, and all of the money power, including the Democratic Party, came down to crush it. Right? To destroy it, and outlaw all the things that the populists were using. There were different election laws back then, and it was possible to vote for two people, or have a person run as a different party, and then he would join your party later. All this kind of stuff was outlawed to keep that kind of threat at bay. And what happened after the populists lost and were crushed is that liberalism came about. The whole idea of liberalism is basically conceding at the outset that capitalism is the best possible system, and we should all, so the liberals believe that you can just put enough constraints on capitalism to keep it under control. And I don't believe that. And I think starting the whole conversation for the whole 20th century by conceding at the beginning that anything that threatens capitalism is a bridge too far is you're giving away the whole game.
Right.
Because capitalism is always going to do the same thing. Capitalism is a wealth concentrating machine, and it concentrates everything up to the top, just like a pyramid. I did a post that capitalism is a pyramid scheme, and that is the function of capitalism, is to concentrate capital into fewer and fewer hands. And we're seeing it play out right now. I mean, with all these tech billionaires, they just have more money than they can possibly ever spend in their lives, and it just gives them way too much power in the world when you have that much concentrated wealth in one person's hands. And I like to bring this up. You talk about the difference between 1 million and 1 billion. We have all these billionaires now. It's exponential. It's an exponential difference. It's like 1 million seconds is like 2 weeks, and 1 billion seconds is like 33 years or something. It's like
11 days. Yeah, something like that.
The vastness of the size differences. People just they have a hard time understanding that.
Can I give you mine? So you've inspired me
please.
somewhat as a TikTok guy. I have some TikToks. I don't know how much you looked at my profile. I hope you wasted entire nights of sleep being entertained by my charm and brilliance. But I gave up. I've been in and out of like the posting game on different platforms. Among the reasons things don't take off because persistence is rewarded, and But I have my own. So I fantasize about my billions to millions comparison as a TikTok video. So I'm gonna throw it at you real quick.
Yeah.
Let's not use the math logic generator or the logical brain that you just used. Let's use our emotional reasoning. Imagine having $17 in your pocket. Okay, put the money in your pocket. You can feel it. Okay, good, it's there. Now feel it, and it's gone. Okay, that sucks. Where's my $17? Right? That's you kind of know how that feels. Everybody sort of understands, and you could do this with whatever amount of money you want. Now let's put $17,000 in your pocket. And how are you going to feel with $17,000 anywhere in your pocket? That's not going to. You're not going to be. Have you ever seen that much money up close or in person? Maybe.
Right.
What do you? Right. Someone with that much money is off to buy a car or do some stuff or whatever. I mean, and now touch your pocket where that $17,000 was, and it's gone. How are you going to feel if you lost $17,000 emotionally?
That's a bigger bite.
That's
definitely a bigger bite.
You're going to rip your room apart to find $17,000 as opposed to $17. So that's the way I thought I would gain TikTok.
I love that. And one more that I used is the difference between Earth and Jupiter. Jupiter, you look at this gas planet. Yeah. It's so huge, but that's roughly the size. That's roughly the 1 to 1,000 difference.
Right, I like that. I'm a big space astronomy guy, so that hits home real good for me.
There you go.
Very good. Yeah. Star Wars versus The Expanse. Both are good, but Star Wars is way big. No, I don't know why I'm doing that. I've been watching The Expanse recently.
A big Star Wars fan. Big Star Wars fan.
All right, yeah. Star Trek? You like Star Trek?
I didn't grow up with Star Trek.
Okay.
I had some family friends who were into Star Trek, but my dad wasn't into it, and so I just wasn't really exposed to it. But I do have my little tiny Millennium Falcon here that I like to keep close by.
Nice. I wish you'd open it and pull out like a tiny Harrison Ford and a little tiny Chewbacca. Okay, so
I do have small Millennium Falcons that do that, but yeah.
All right. I could easily get distracted with that. I have right. So the wealth concentration thing too. It always strikes me as like man, there's so many threads that you opened up that I want to bring up, but like we accepted laws and rules. Although I actually think part of what I'm kind of parsing out with my whole project is about the different accountability standards for the ruling class and for the lower class. Just simply trying to get the subject of my
Oh, for
documentary,
sure.
Cenk Uygur, to even acknowledge the truth has taken years and years of effort, and he's still not close to doing it. The film is called Tell the Truth, Cenk. And because he doesn't have to be held accountable for lying about workers or, the ethical violations that drove us to
Right.
unionize and all that sorts of ways. But I just happen to be crazy enough to
Sure.
pursue it, because the more rational advice would be to just what are you going to do? Drive yourself nuts for this much time doing something to try to.
Well,
But
I think you bring up a really great example, because Cenk Uygur has this public persona of being the champion of the left and a champion of the people, but then your real lived experience is that he is, when push comes to shove, he is acting like a capitalist, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what capitalism does. It is relentless in that
Yeah.
way, and once you become the guy who's running a whole TV program or whatever, you now have the interest in crushing labor, and it's a function of the system itself, right? Once you're in that position, you feel like you're constantly under the gun to compete, and if you don't compete, then you get crushed. So everybody, because of these forces of competition, goes right to crushing labor, because that's one of the main ones that you can hold on to more of the money for yourself, right? Is by giving less to your workers. And that's 100% a function of the capitalist system.
Yeah.
Because capitalism has the ownership concentrated in the fewest possible hands. And those few people want to maximize their share of it, right? They want to get as much as they can out of it because they're the owners, right? And it doesn't matter that the workers are the ones who are providing all of the value that the owners are hoarding for themselves. That doesn't matter.
You're supposed to be grateful
so
that they let you work on their plantation. I mean, at their company.
Exactly. And plantation. That's it. I mean, I used to kind of I didn't really see how similar modern day capitalism is to slavery. And all our ancestors who were in the labor movement 100 years ago and going even further back, they called this system wage slavery. Yeah. Because you're renting yourself to a capitalist, and you're completely dependent on them for all of the money that you need to survive. And if you lose your job, you lose your ability to pay rent or to buy food for your family. And so that is not an equitable situation. And it is honestly just a funhouse mirror version of slavery. And it's also a funhouse mirror version of feudalism. Our capitalist system was born out of a feudalist system. And the feudal, there was feudalism, there was slavery, and these are not that dissimilar from what we're experiencing now. Just because we have a stock market and because all of us are free to leave our jobs, that somehow makes it so that we're not slaves, even though you can't leave a job you can't survive without a job. Nobody can, just about. And we make our welfare or our social safety net so weak that and by design, because this is a capitalist nation, that it has to be terrible to scare everybody into the workforce.
I heard someone describe it as the current work culture as slavery with shopping privileges. So they create this illusion of freedom, and they create markets by including wages into the whole thing. And they also like to point at the very rare exceptions of someone who climbed into the capitalist class as a proof of your own individual failing. And so they imbue the entire machine with all this extra. It's like they built a more complex machine of oppression because they needed to add magic spells that force us to blame ourselves, that to internalize the oppression.
Absolutely.
In a sense, so that
they've been fine-tuning these strategies for a long time. Yeah, they've been fine-tuning these strategies, and it's all very self-reinforcing. Like all of a lot of the basic attitudes that we grow up with are part of a propaganda system designed to make us consent to this whole system. You know, we don't fight back because we've been conditioned since we were children. Even I was, you know, when I told my story,
Yeah.
to believe that there are no better alternatives, and it's a lie. There are definitely better alternatives. There are definitely better ways to run your society, and I think one of the weaknesses of that propaganda system is the way they idealize public service in government and call them public servants and talk about the idea that government is supposed to be for the people and that it's supposed to be for the public welfare. And it doesn't matter that that's all a lie. If you tell people that enough, they start to believe it, right?
Right.
And I think those ideas should be true. I think the government should represent the people and care about the public welfare and not just care about corporations and political sponsors and the donor class, because that's just reinforcing the capitalist system.
Yeah, yeah. You were saying about feudalism and slavery and capitalism. Like one of my influences, and you're way better read than I am. It's something I hope to connect with this project of the podcast too, is to get recommendations from people like you. And I have a lot of reading catching up to do, I guess is what I mean. But Richard Wolff, I'm sure you're familiar. So he does a lot of stuff on YouTube, and you know he'll point out the serf, and it was the serf and the lord, and slavery was the master and the slave, and capitalism was the employer and the employee. And it's the through line is that someone gives an order and another person has to follow the order. And in this world
absolutely.
we probably would say, I mean, not probably, but we'd rather be an employee than a slave, of course. But is that sufficient to satisfy this incredible cosmic accident of existence and of human consciousness and this beautiful planet that we're entrusted with and that we get to experience? Yet we're just all sort of stuck doing the thing. Most of our lives are spent working, of our productive years, toiling away so that somebody who doesn't need money gets more money. And so that it's, am I correct to sort of boil Marxism down? I know that's like a challenge people have been trying for 140 years, but like it's the class relationship. Is that a fair way to put that? It's that antagonistic, natural tension, but it's also there's a group of order givers and there's a group of order followers, and that's essentially
right. So what you're talking about is hierarchy, and this is interesting. I think Republicans especially respond to hierarchy. I think conservatives especially have an acceptance of hierarchy, an acceptance that authority should be respected and followed. And another book I read, this
I love that you got props.
This was a heavy lift. This just happened to be sitting right on my bookshelf here. The Dawn of Everything, and David Graeber, gone too soon. He talks a lot in this book about authority and about ancient cultures, and how in ancient cultures authority was given, but mostly on a temporary basis. It was very temporary. Like it could be a week. Like you have a big get together and somebody's declared king or whatever for the festival, and they're in charge, and they would even have like police forces that would, they could put somebody to death. They were in charge. Like it was no question. But at the end of that, or outside of that festival situation, nobody respected that authority. Like, it's over. Like it was a very finite period when that was in effect, because they didn't trust authority, and you should never trust authority. Right. Authority should only be given on a temporary basis. And our system now, where we, our presidents basically have the ability to declare wars unilaterally. One person can start a war. It's just, well, that's certainly something that founders never wanted, because that's exactly the type of monarchical power that they were fighting against. So, in that aspect, it's a rebuke of our entire system and makes a mockery of our Constitution. But on the other hand, the framers were right. Like, we shouldn't give someone that power. It's absurd to give one person that power. And then you get somebody, well, Trump doesn't even matter. Like, my opinion about Trump. But you go back through all of our recent presidents have been making war on on other nations unilaterally. Like,
Right.
because they're the commander in chief, they can attack whoever they want, and Congress just goes along with it. Congress didn't used to go along with it, but now the power system is eroded so much and the presidency is so powerful that they can do stuff like that. And that's horrible. And so, you know, as somebody who's an anti-authoritarian to the core, I reject that kind of authority. I reject our system, which, you know, entrenches authority. And I think that's one part of it. And the other part you mentioned is the class basis, because the upper classes are given all the authority. And it is, when you talk about boiling Marxism down, to me, the most important difference between Marxism and capitalism is the ownership. Who owns the means of production? And some people, you know, communists will get mad at me because, you know, they say, no, it's really, you know, it's not communism until it's stateless, classless, moneyless society, which that's all great too. Like, it's good to have a vision and a place you're trying to get, right?
Yeah.
But for people to understand, especially people like Americans who are propagandized from our childhood to have a fear-based reaction to anything related to communism, you can say the word communism and people get scared and they start shutting down. But the most important difference between capitalism and communism, in my opinion, is the ownership. And in capitalism, the ownership class is a very small group of rich people. And in communism, the people are supposed to own the means of production. The workers are supposed to own the means of production. And I think ownership is a little bit misleading, because when you talk about ownership, you aren't necessarily talking about all of the power. That's just kind of tacitly understood. But you know, if the workers have ownership, that means they have complete control over everything that happens at work. Think about your workplace. I don't even have to tell you. You know what it's like in a workplace, and you know that your employer doesn't have your best interests at heart.
Right.
And there can be safety concerns where people have legitimate grievances or worries about their workplace is unsafe, and the company doesn't want to spend the money to keep the workers safe and protect their lives. And they will try and, that's, you know, besides wages, they will cut corners that way too with worker safety, right? So if the workers own the workplace, they're not going to skimp on that because they don't want to die, right? So it's just another example that if the workers have control, but the most important aspect of worker control is what happens to the profits, right? Like, now all of the profits are concentrated and they're flying out of the country to the Cayman Islands and, you know, tax shelters, and they're not being taxed. You know, we have this whole government debt system where we're borrowing money from the rich rather than taxing them. And that's crazy because there is so much wealth and things could be so much better, but that is not something that the wealthy class cares about. Like, they don't care about things being better for the working class. And so if the workers were the ones making the decisions about the profits, well, then that changes things a whole lot about how much money you earn at work, because you can vote on it. Well, you know, Bob is our CEO. Should he be making $20 million this year? And all the rest of us making, you know, 35 to 80K, right? That doesn't make any sense. And I don't think the workers would divide things that way so that Bob, the CEO, gets all the money. And they might not even, you know, you talk about Richard Wolff, he talks about this kind of thing, about different ways that companies can be set up where workers have control, and the workers can vote to have a rotating CEO where, you know, Bob is the CEO for 3 months of the year, and then Linda is the CEO for the next 3, and then you find somebody else, and you know, the CEO is not in charge of maximizing shareholder value, because there are no shareholders, because the workers are the ones who are making all the decisions. So the shareholders are just a way, we call them shareholders, but it's basically rich people, because 90% of the stock market is owned by the richest 10%. So the rest of the 90%, we only make up a small portion of that stock market. We're not benefiting from the stock market. It's all designed to concentrate wealth and to benefit the rich, the people who can afford to own stocks.
And
And
then
most workers, we're spending all our money just living, and we
Yeah.
don't have money left over to buy stocks.
we're paying some rich person who claimed ownership over basic necessities like that water rights and that, the sort of stuff that
Right.
even on,
Yeah,
I think a
it's
low
insane.
grade kind of a revolutionary project would be to just nationalize basic necessities or other mechanisms for collective
100%.
responsibility and ownership of basic necessities. And then luxury goods can
100%.
be for
And I
profit
think,
or
like,
whatever. But yeah, we don't,
and
that would
you know,
be,
those are so,
go ahead.
those sort of things are so vulnerable to monopoly power. Like,
Yeah.
you sell the water rights to Nestle, and now they have a monopoly on water in this region. Like, why would you hand that to a for-profit company?
Yeah.
It's insane.
Electricity in
And
Texas. Yeah.
they're just there to maximize profits. And so you give a monopoly that kind of power, they have total control to increase all of their, what they're charging their customers, and the customers can't go anyplace else. It's a nightmare situation. I did a post about that recently, based off the Black Mirror episode that came out recently.
Yeah, I watched that earlier today as I was prepping for this interview because I'm a huge professional type of interviewer guy. Yes,
Nicely done.
the concept of ownership itself, I think, is one of those almost like sacrosanct notions that we don't even realize as a human construct until someone maybe points it out. And
That's a
what
great
does
point.
it even
Well, I'll bring this
mean?
book back in.
Okay.
This book talks about that. Going back, our concept of ownership goes back to ancient Rome, believe it or not, which was a slave society.
Mm-hmm.
And because humans were something that you could own back then, you had life and death power over the people that you owned, right? And the only restriction they had is you couldn't have your slaves ripped apart by animals without permission from some kind of judge or something. But you could kill them any other way.
So they got
just not be ripped apart by animals.
Yeah.
So this idea of being able to destroy what you own completely predates America, completely predates most of modern Western society. It goes all the way back to ancient Rome, or even before that, possibly. And that's, I mean, is that really the best understanding to have about ownership? Because it's not the only possible idea you can have about ownership. You talk about a lot of the Native American populations, they had more of an idea about collective ownership. It doesn't belong to one person, and one person can't destroy it, right?
Yeah. Land, especially.
You have,
yeah.
Right. You have a shared water source. You can't do something that's going to destroy the water source for every other person that's using it, an animal, right? Like that would be crazy in that kind of society. So it is possible to have other definitions of ownership.
Yeah, it seems to me that the modern notion of it, at least, and you said it goes all the way back deep. It's the right to destroy, rent, use, ignore, neglect, manipulate, sell, everything except be responsible to others with. It's like a mechanism for excluding shared responsibility. And then you introduce pollution and environmental degradation, which is absolutely the thing that's going to force revolution. Like I think there's a lot of risks in how do we actually instigate one in a modern surveillance system we have. But no matter the giant beast bearing down on this planet is environmental collapse. That is going to, and I think that's what. And I don't mean to veer the conversation into that, but that's what's informing the. So don't follow this lead, but that's what's informing the tech bros taking over to try to convert the world into robot slavery and robot labor.
Probably.
We could probably do a whole
about an environmentalism post recently talking about the old Crying Indian commercial public service announcement campaign. And what you're talking about, it's called externalities. When business has things that they don't want to pay for and they can foist it onto the public or onto the government to take care of, there's a name for that. That's called externalities. And they love doing that because the more they can push off those costs onto other people, the more they get to keep for themselves.
We learned that word in business school. I went to school for business, in industrial distribution management, which is manufacturing, production, and almost a marketing degree. So it's like supply chain management. We learned the externalities.
Nice.
And not that they made it like, haha, this is going to serve us, but it was like, these are externalities. Don't worry about that. Worry about this stuff that you
Right.
got to, and yet it's a closed system, especially now that there's globalized shipping and globalized freight, globalized extraction schemes. We can't, like, one of my little things is pollution is, or profit is the rate at which a technological species destroys its environment. The harder we hunt for profit, the faster we will produce those externalities that will destroy the planet. I don't know if I don't know
Yeah.
if I have the charts ready for you yet.
I mean,
when
that kind of tracks. Yeah, kind
when
of
I write
tracks.
my book Hanksism, I want to brand myself as the next Carl Hanks. Hankses.
Okay.
I'll get into that later. But like profit is the more, because we don't price any of those externalities, because those are debts to the future or burdens on others far away, and the wealthy are the most capable of avoiding them, or then they can sell you stuff to fix the problems that they're able to very cleverly produce even more profit from the harm that they cause with all the pollution. But yes, I think that's a fundamental part of the collective ownership. And I don't mean like the good kind. I mean like as a planetary animal, that we need to grapple with the fact that the Earth is not here to be consumed and destroyed. It must be harmonized at best.
Yeah.
And I don't. It even.
But you look at Genesis chapter 1, and it says right there.
Book.
It's like in the first. It's like 17, like the 17th verse in chapter 1 of Genesis says that God gave everything to mankind to use as he saw fit, and just handed, so like it's not surprising that people come to that conclusion when they grow up hearing that in Western society, right? And I think it's so destructive. It's such a destructive idea.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that makes me think of the freedom over versus freedom from kind of.
Sure.
But I don't know if binary is the right way to call that, but to limit someone's ownership or to put limits on what they can do with things that they own, is to limit their freedom to destroy, or their freedom to profit, or their freedom to maximize their exploitative uses. And I think like kind of what I'm circling with this film project I'm doing is the concept of leverage. I haven't yet finished I have a whole third of the film left to go. So it's about roughly 90 minutes are out, then another 30 minutes or so. I'm trying to get a fundraising thing going to try to help pay for it. It's not a good way to do documentaries at all. I hope it's my first documentary of a long career. I have a lot to give, but man, it's like a quest I'm on but the sort of core thesis of it, because I don't want it just to be considered like TYT internet slop or TYT drama. They provoke a lot of Sturm and Drang online. I'm within that bubble a little bit, but like the themes that we experienced there was the class struggle, was someone who, Cenk, you might not realize, is a graduate of of Wharton, same school as Musk and Trump, same business school, and then a Columbia trained lawyer. And but the theme that the film is, I'm hoping to get to is leverage. Is that everything comes down to leverage, which itself is sort of a synonym for consent and for freedom and for democracy, and like all these concepts of leverage all boil down to like how much shit should you have to put up with. And we were putting up with shit at TYT. In my case, I've been very public about the reasons we unionize. This is the stuff that they lied about, is that, I was classified independent contractor and then part-time, working 40-hour weeks for zero benefits as a video editor, next to people who were called full-time employees who got benefits. A previous union effort had started, by the way, a year prior to me, like intentionally waking up the union. And then they told their audience that Cenk's political foes started the union, which is just nuts. So it's just, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you all this right now. I just feel like, but
you're onto something there.
Yeah.
Talking about leverage.
It's leverage.
Because
everything.
It's one of the main things that the owner class, the capitalist class, wants every worker to forget, is that workers have incredible leverage over them and the amount of money that they make.
Exactly.
Because we can withhold our work. We can withhold our labor. We can withhold our money that we spend. People don't even seem to people don't realize, because we've been conditioned not to realize it. We've been conditioned to hate unions by our society and to mistrust unions and to associate them only with mafia and, all sorts of negativity, like any negativity you can think of in our movies and our TV, just repeat those themes over and over again. So people are conditioned to kind of hate and fear unions just the way they are with communism. But union power, union strength is the leverage. When the workers get together and they say, no, we're not going to keep making money for you. We're going to withhold our labor until you deal with us fairly. And that is the most powerful thing that the worker has. And the elites, the wealthy, they don't want us to remember that. And it's also, it's our spending power and it's our labor power. And so we can also, they try to outlaw boycott, divestment, sanctions, right? Because they don't want people boycotting Israel.
It would be a crime
and they make it
not
against
spend
the
your
law
money.
somehow. Like, I don't know how you make it against the law to boycott something where you're going to force people to buy something they don't want, which is something that seems crazy in our capitalist culture. But boycotting is a huge lever. Like, you withdraw support, like and that's one of the things that all the protesters, that were protesting about the Palestine situation, especially last year on the college campuses, that was one of the main things they were talking about, is we got to disinvest from all of these companies that are helping Israel, and we helping them commit this genocide, like the defense companies and any companies in Israel that are benefiting, from our school, our college, our giant piles of money that these colleges have, and remove that. Right? Like that's a power. That's another powerful lever. And we do have levers, and it is possible to use them, but you need unity for that. And people, so that really class consciousness is the key to that unity, because people have to see with their own eyes that the owning class, the people, the rich, don't have your interests at heart. Their interests are not your interests. And once you see that, and I think everybody who works at a job can relate to that, right? Because you were experiencing that at your job, working for a lefty personality, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if any capitalist has the best intentions or doesn't want to be a bad guy, right? And wants to treat his workers well. Those fundamental relationships and power relationships and just the fundamental nature of class make it that this class has a different interest from this class. And the working class needs to wake up to that class consciousness and unify in order to change that situation. And it is possible to do. Plenty of things, people say, oh God, you talk about ending capitalism. That's so crazy. That's so pie in the sky. But we got rid of monarchy as our founding thing that we did in this country, right? We also ended slavery, mostly, if you don't include the prison system, which is still legalized slavery, and you don't include wage slavery, which we're all taking part in. But, the institution of slavery was demolished during the Civil War. So those are two gigantic institutions that if you talk to somebody in the 1850s, they would have said, end slavery, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Or if you talk to somebody in 1640 about ending monarchy, they would have gone, wow, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Right? It's hard to imagine because we're in it. And it seems like it's just going to keep rolling this way forever. But I think what we're seeing right now with all of the turbulence in the world is it. And I think TikTok's a big part of this in America, is people waking up and that class consciousness spreading. And that's what's going to change things.
I hope, not to sound skeptical, but the ability for TikTok to kind of regulate and the algorithm to sort of be manipulated, and I completely agree that because I a lot of this stuff in my kind of internal universe that I have yet to put into my 7,000 page book that's going to revolutionize humanity is about entropy and about information ecosystems and about what people can even be conditioned to even accept as true. And it seems so obvious that this stuff needs to be fixed. And once you kind of tune into it too, it's super intuitive as far as I'm concerned. I feel like the greatest persuaders for Marxists, why is Marxism persuasive is a question I sort of rattles in my brain. It's the bosses are doing the persuading. It's why does it seem to not die off the way they hope it would? It's because every job sucks because of all these reasons that we've been talking about this whole time, right?
Yeah.
One thing I think about is man, I'm trying to keep up with my thoughts here. I'm like abandoning ideas as I'm talking, but is our because I want to ask this of other people who have some know-how about these topics is are capitalists, why don't they get to why aren't they called Marxists? Why, like, it seems to me like Marxist concepts is kind of like Newtonian physics. Like it's more of a predictive and a descriptive model about how things function, not so much
Well,
and
I
so
don't
like
want to get too scientific about it. That's a
yeah.
personal bugaboo of mine, is the
Yeah.
way that economics is treated as a scientific
Well, that for
kind
sure.
of
Yeah.
we call it the dismal science, but
Yeah.
it's a joke to call it a science because it's social science, which is still science, but it's not science like physics is science, right?
Not at all.
And I don't think that Marx necessarily created any kind of like Einsteinian equations necessarily, but what he did was critique capitalism.
Yeah.
Like his greatest value is he studied capitalism. He read David Ricardo and Adam Smith at Wealth of Nations and got all of the details down and critiqued it, and was able to find the internal contradictions inside of capitalism, that and to point out the fundamental nature of the class arrangement. And I think,
Well, that's what I'm saying
we
is
don't.
like, go ahead.
Well, I don't think we need to be too precious about Marx. I mean, I think he gives us a whole lot to chew on. But we also have 150 years more of history since then to refine our ideas and look at things that didn't work and things that did work. And so we don't. So people like or pro-capitalists especially love to use Marx as some kind of scary satanic bludgeon, and point to different things that they misinterpret or other things that they look at just from a very negative viewpoint, and paint all of anti-capitalism with that brush. And I think ultimately economics is just a way of modern economics, modern free market economics, the stuff that the brand that was once known as laissez-faire and now is known as free market economics, popularized by Milton Friedman, is a fraud. It's just a self-justifying way of propping up the system we have. And you talk about the owning class being Marxist. They're not, but they know they're Marx, and they understand those dynamics, and they use that to their advantage. And they've learned their lessons about worker unity and worker strength and worker power. And that's why they've spent the last 100 years demonizing communists and demonizing unions,
Right.
is because they don't want people to see that. There's nobody who is more aware of class power than the owning class, the people who are at the top. They get it. Like there's no illusions. They understand it, and they want to maintain it.
Well,
so
do you mean their class solidarity, the ruling class solidarity, or do you mean like both kind of?
I mean, basically? I mean, ruling class solidarity.
Yeah, they're really into it.
They have it figured out, that what they need to do to keep us down, and they work very hard at it.
Yeah, as a source of power. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying about that. I don't adhere to. I find that kind of thing a little silly, honestly, to sort of like dial in on the theory super hard and really get rigid about the pedantry of the specifics. And I'm saying that as somewhat ignorant person about it. I sort of had a guy named Marx who moved from Germany to London and had a big brain that couldn't resist observing the world around him and describing it accurately. Not done his thing, all these factors would still be there. The way that the rulers would be imposing their will on the order takers would all still be happening. I guess sort of what I mean is like it just describes capitalism more accurately than capitalists describe capitalism. Like when I first learned what it was.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget. I think. Well, I brought this up in the comments before that what they teach you in business school is different from what they teach you in economics when you're getting an economics degree.
Mhm.
In an economics degree, you're being indoctrinated into a certain way of thinking, a certain pro-capitalist way of thinking. I just saw a young woman post on TikTok recently talking about how if she tried to criticize capitalism in her papers in college, the professor would say, I'm going to fail you if you don't write something positive about capitalism. So it's like, it's happening even in schools, but like that's the nature of an economics degree it's a pure indoctrination supporting the system that we have now. It's like a priesthood. That's why I did a big series comparing capitalism to a religion, because it's based on faith. It's not based on logic and reason. It's not based on science. They pretend it is, but it's not. And when you go to business school, they don't fill your head with a bunch of mumbo jumbo that doesn't actually apply to the real world. They're not working to indoctrinate you. They're working to help you be a good capitalist, right? They're teaching you what you need in a business situation to maximize shareholder value or whatever. Like they're teaching you something different, and that's why there's a business degree and an economics degree, and they serve two different functions.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that leverage. Gosh, damn, I just lost a great thought. It was going to be so good. But the whole
Brother,
like
I can relate. I do the same thing all the time.
No problem. We're at an hour. Are you good to talk a little more? Or do you feel want to wrap?
Yeah, absolutely.
Soon?
Could we take a 5-minute break real quick?
Yeah, 100%. Welcome back, everybody. Quick break. Just a reminder to go to tiktok.com/let's make them pay. I don't know. Just look it up. Type it in there. Support Scott on Substack.
Usually it's one word. Let's make them pay. One word.
All one word. I'm always impressed with your output and your consistency, and you do it. You actually promote yourself at the end. But,
thank you.
So I did remember a couple of the threads I had left dangling. So I'll just throw these out. That one, and real quick, was that like the whole notion. I said this at the very beginning, but like wealth acquisition and the accountability differences between the rulers and the ruler givers and the order givers and the order takers, and that's. But I was leading towards like we accept limitations on our behavior all the time. As to mitigate harm. All laws are limits on behavior, except for wealth acquisition, except for how much money you can get. Like the idea of a maximum wage or maximum asset cap, which I know it's like buying power parity is different. So wealth, the precise number, but just even how absurd amount of money $900 million is. And yet if we limited wealth to $999, the world would be so much better off, even with that ridiculous amount of money. And it just it strikes me though that is a function of their wealth being a function of our stress. In other words, wealth is hoarded stress. Wealth is transmogrified stress. That's kind of how I see it, because stress is how they titrate leverage. That's what determines whether they can force you to put up with bullshit that you don't want to put up with, And like to wrap that into the part of the theme of the unionizing effort, or all kind of notions of gaining leverage, is I asked them to change my working status so I could have health insurance. It felt very scary to work while the guy's telling the camera that people die without health insurance. And you got papers in your desk that says you have no, as an individual, the answer was fuck you, get back to work. They didn't put it in those terms, but that's how it felt. And on top of that, the kind of extra juice of this whole story is that it's such an explicitly political kind of business and a media charged environment. It's not just any old ice cream shop. But as a group, we had more leverage. So individuals don't have leverage, but groups do. It's very basic social physics. I mean, I know you understand, but that's sort of the core stuff. And it's so intuitive. And this kind of another thing was that like I didn't learn. I'd heard the word Marx. I had been trained to be afraid of communism. I recited the Pledge of Allegiance as a kid, which I think that's one of the more egregious like nationalist brainwashing things that we do in this country is force children to, recite loyalty to the fucking flag. Like, what a ridiculous thing. It's so weird. It's even as a kid, I was just like, what is this? Is nuts. But I only knew that I was supposed to be scared of it. I didn't actually really know what communism was. I knew my dad was scared of it. I knew the media, all this sort of ambient stuff that's in our culture that you don't even realize, especially like Hollywood being dialed in like with the military industrial complex in terms of using like assets. They get to approve scripts. Like, I don't think people realize that how much propaganda over the decades Hollywood has done,
totally.
and the power that has over children.
Anytime you see an actual military vehicle being used, like like any of the fighter jets or helicopters or any of that shit, that means the Department of Defense had to sign off on that script, and they're not going to allow anything that makes the military look bad.
Right.
Or so, like, you're just handing all this power over in exchange for that helicopter or fighter jet.
Yeah, into the cultural conditioning.
But
and
something you were talking about before about authority, that is a point that I don't think gets made enough, is there's so much talk in our culture about freedom. We all have this freedom, the freedom to choose, the freedom to quit your job, this freedom. But everybody who works, everybody who doesn't work in a place that's owned by the workers works basically in a top-down authoritarian situation. You got your CEO at the top, and every one of these organizations is an authoritarian structure, top down. And the big boss makes all the decisions, and it just trickles right on down. And if you don't go along with that, you're out. And so we lose so much power just by accepting that job and walking into that workplace. You're putting yourself into that authority situation, and you're handing over the authority to this other person to make decisions about how much money you get paid, and what your salary is, and if it's up to them to pay you enough that you can hopefully survive off that. So these are all we're all conditioned to fear authoritarianism, or to be critical of authoritarians when it's like a dictator, like a Mussolini or a Hitler, right? But when we're completely blind to the fact that every day when you walk into work, you're working for a little mini Hitler or Mussolini who is the CEO of your company, who gets total control over everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to ask for days off. You have to ask another adult if you can go to the bathroom, or whatever it is. And obviously there's slight degrees of variability there, but
about like the people who work at the Purdue chicken processing plants have to wear diapers on the line because they can't get any breaks, and they just have to piss their pants.
That's crazy.
That's freedom? Is that nuts. Freedom to you? You seem free when you have that situation? Absurd.
Right. Yeah. Amazon drivers, Amazon where fulfillment centers where they,
same thing. I hear about Amazon drivers having to fill bottles and toss them out of the car. Like, you're not going to give somebody a 5-minute break to use the bathroom, Amazon? Come on.
And
Jeff Bezos isn't rich enough.
Yeah. And then you get into like another one of my sort of favorite topics, or at least another way of approaching this whole thing, is the structural, physical, like, build of American cities. Oh, there we go. We have an animal on your shoulder. You
this have Teller.
Hey, Teller.
Nice. Oriental short hair here.
Beautiful face.
He's a very handsome fella.
Yeah.
Oh
man.
And my wife likes to point out that he's a very long boy. Long. You can't even see how long he is. You gotta do. There we go. Very long, handsome fella.
That's an impressive. That's an impressive stretch. I haven't been able to do that since I was 14.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got the distance.
Their shoulders aren't connected by a bone. They have like a floating arm in their muscle. They don't have like the same. That's why cats can. That's why they're so bendy. They can. Yeah. They're
okay.
It's like one of the weird, freaky cat feline things that they don't have a collarbone or something. It's like their arms aren't connected to their skeleton. Google it. Yeah, look it up. I hope I'm right.
Did not know. Yeah. I love it.
Well, the structure of the society in general is it's like delivery drivers that have to drive around and can't go into any bathrooms anywhere because we don't do public bathrooms because the cities don't want to fund any of that, and like the
Right.
entire structure is built to maintain stress. Like stress is the root code
Yeah.
of the entire economy, and so like another one of my things that I want to add to the conversation is like instead of saying, and you can tell me I'm an idiot for this, I would welcome it, but instead of the phrase workers must seize the means of production, why not the phrase workers must seize the means of stress? It feels to me that stress reduce, obviously with the implication to reduce stress, or at least to have agency over the stress, because we still consent to
Yeah.
to some degree of subjugation and some degree of stress if it's done with agency. That feels a little bit closer to what when they do end of life surveys. People want like they always say they wish they spent more time with their loved ones and they had more agency over their lives. That's always like the 1 and 2. And it seems to me that the reason you want to seize production is so that you can reduce stress. Like they're connected.
Well,
Production and
that's certainly
stress
part of it.
are
I mean,
absolutely
that's
related.
certainly part of it. But I think, like we were discussing before, once you have the means of production, then you can make decisions.
Exactly.
So that's kind of what you're getting at. But
Yeah.
it's what you're suggesting a little oblique. I don't think a person without the context that you provided would understand means of stress, because there's a lot of other stress factors just besides our jobs. Like my family stresses me out, and seizing the means of stress wouldn't really change that situation, sadly.
Okay. All right. I'll update my language. But like
But
yes,
but
it would
the
take like
means of production is important, because we have this owning class that owns the means of production, and so it's they own all the factories, they own all the buildings, they own all the equipment and machinery, but there's nothing that really says that we have to do things that way, that we need rich people to own those things so that we can have jobs, so that we can function in an economy. You could, so that, well, just to use one example, we talk about your internet broadband company in your town. It's probably a monopoly. Maybe there's two, and they don't really compete. Their prices are about the same. And you can swap between the one or the other, but you're not really getting a huge benefit in service or anything. And you could nationalize that, or buy them out, and have it run as just like a city service. Right? They've done this in. I have family down in Glasgow, Kentucky. This is one of the places that did that. So back in the 80s, they just made a cable company. The city did, and so they've just sold cheap cable and broadband to their residents as just like a public. They're not trying to make a profit.
enough to pay for it.
They're not trying to squeeze
Yeah.
everybody, right? I mean, sometimes costs go up because they have to make improvements to the system or whatever, and you pay for those. But like, it's not the same as Xfinity charging you $80 for broadband when 15 years ago they used to charge $29, right? And the broadband quality didn't change that much, or if at all. I don't know. I'm not a technical guy, but I think it's all about, when you have those monopolies, they can just pile it on you and charge whatever they feel like charging.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that the benefits go to your stress goes up because you're going to have to work a little more to pay for that extra $40 on the bill. And the benefit you don't get yet someone else does who's not actually working for it through the magic of ownership. And then also the stock market has its own kind of extra layers of, magic's not the right word, but that market forces of speculative investing that just generates bubbles and produces the kind of churn, because it all falls apart if they sell everything. It's a pyramid scheme of epic proportions, it seems to me. And I kind of the concept to me too that I very much relate to is, after the Young Turks, I worked for a woodworking shop. I tried to do like a socialist woodworking business where I would like gather up found furniture off the sidewalks, because there's always furniture in LA, and turn them into shit stools. It was sort of a YouTube project called Bum Rush Industries, but the idea was I'd sell like fancy poop stools for the bathroom, which I highly recommended if you've never given one a try. Anyway, I needed money. I ran out. You know, it wasn't like I was producing income from it, but I found a job at a woodworking place. Something you were talking about earlier was like the safety stuff. That, you know, it was like a 19th century. It had some very beautiful moments with the big open door and the dust glowing in the sunlight. But I also didn't have any health care, and I worked so hard at this business, or at this job, holding vibrating tools, and my arms started to hurt and my wrists started to hurt, and then I started to reposition my body to work a little, and then my elbows started, and then I started wearing braces. I'm wearing a brace on 4 different spots on my body, because if I take a day off, I can't afford food, and if I take it, and I can't afford to go to a doctor anyway, and I've wrecked my wrists now. I can't even do woodworking anymore without being heavily wrist braced, and I wound up quitting in the middle of the day after asking the boss if I could switch to 3 days. I was doing 4 days a week. I would heal on the weekends, and then try to get back to it, you know, on Monday. But then the weekend healing stopped working. You know what I mean? And so like the amount of pain that I endured for those last 4 or 5 months, because I couldn't go to a doctor. What if I had gone to a doctor 4 months prior and said my elbows are you know, my wrists, okay, switch your, you know, whatever. Somebody would have it would have been an intervention, and that level of like cost to do it. And what I had some point to, the handle. That's right, the handle. So I see the financialization thing too as this another massive knot that needs to be untied. I don't necessarily think we just simply untie it all and eliminate it exactly. I think like money should function at best as lubricant for some things. People think that capital goes away under socialism, but it just becomes deprioritized. They're still going to have piles of money that needs to be shifted around for various ventures.
It's you know, I did a post about this, one of my favorite posts about the Bank of North Dakota, and it's there were some progressives or I forget, some socialists who were elected to power in North Dakota in like the teens or the 20s, and they started up this Bank of North Dakota, and its whole purpose is to serve the people of North Dakota. So it's a publicly owned bank. It's owned by the citizens of North Dakota, and it prioritizes development in North Dakota. And it's so popular. It's basically a socialist enterprise, but it's so popular, even in a super red state like North Dakota, they'll never get rid of it.
Right.
Because it's such a great utility to have something like that that's owned by the public. And you could do banks like that all across the country. Or, you know, I mean, you talk about credit unions are kind of the same idea, just on a smaller scale. But you could scale up to state level, citywide, like, you know, New York could have its own public bank. And you could get cheap banking services, cheap loans. But see, that would threaten the profits of the entire finance industry. So they would never allow that kind of change to be made. But you can have public pools of money that go towards public things and that do things for their customers. You know, the whole purpose of the enterprise is not to make a profit, right? The purpose of the enterprise is to serve the people. So that's a completely different idea. And when you do that, it opens up all sorts of possibilities. You don't have to have overdraft fees anymore. Those are just a profit generator for banks. So, you know, you can blow out a lot of this squeezing that the banks do if you had alternatives like that.
Yeah, it disincentivizes the scamming. You know, like I remember the Wells Fargo that they were, you know, I think that was 10 years ago. It feels like something. Or Elizabeth Warren lectured them, I think, is what kind of led to her pushing for the CFPB, which of course now they're trying to completely dismantle. But yeah, postal banking there's occasional initiatives on local scales to try to have post offices offer simple banking services, and it's always resisted.
Yeah, it's a common thing in other countries, but not here.
Yeah,
because it's too much competition. Yeah. It's too much competition for the capitalist enterprises, and the government serves capital; it doesn't serve the public.
Yes, yeah. So that the stress is forced on people, so the profits can go up. And sort of like my thing is I think about like literal work, like, and I don't like to exclude anybody from this notion, but if you make your money having meetings and giving orders, as Wall Street types do, we reward that behavior with immense amounts of wealth and influence and power. But if you're
Yeah.
holding onto a tool, I keep pointing at my hand, my mallet back there. If you're using your hands, if you're putting your body into something, if you're driving, if you're cleaning, if you're bending over, picking, all that work, what we called essential during the COVID first year. We
Sure.
praised them for
Sure.
their essential, yet that just means we get to abuse people more. So I feel like there's some sort of notion of, I'm not asking you to totally dismantle this idea, but like tool proximity is kind of the concept. Is sort of like when the world should be run by people who drive cars and trucks and fix things and use tools. I know I'm obsessed with pointing at it. I can't get it right now. You're looking at and instead the guys who, you know, don't cook any of their own meals and live in luxury and can abandon any place they want if the weather gets, like everybody, like the whole system is this big placenta that's built so that the people who don't actually do any real work other than claim ownership, and I think their main skill is making other vampires comfortable, is essentially what rich people are very good at. That's part of that whole class solidarity that they experience, which I've labeled that rat king solidarity, because they're just like a big entwined rat king of evil, just snarling at the rest of the world, but they all kind of look out for each other. And so like the proximity to actual like entropy induced like tightening work where you actually do stuff, and in other countries mediate this through sectoral bargaining, for instance, which I think is something America is so far away from. I know like there's that story of the Dutch McDonald's that didn't want to pay proper rates, but all the other restaurant and they also had alliances with shipping unions and sectoral
and they
power.
With sympathy strikes, they were able to make McDonald's change their tune and pay their workers fairly. And so that shows the power of sympathy strikes, a thing that is illegal here in America because of Taft-Hartley. But I totally hear you about the incentive structure being so crazy. You talk about, our culture incentivizes self-interest, and people who are the most selfish and the most sociopathic are the ones who are rewarded the most. And it goes all the way back to Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, talking about the invisible hand of the market. Like if we leave the market alone and everyone operates in their own self-interest, then magically everyone will be taken care of and we'll have the best possible outcome. And it's asinine.
Nonsense.
It's just absurd to base an entire society on selfishness. Like human beings, yes, there are selfish human beings. I'm not going to argue that. And some are way more selfish than others. But selfishness is not the primary impulse driving all human behavior. And that's what capitalism would have us believe. And it's a lie. And the only thing that makes societies, and this goes back all the way in human history to prehistoric times, is cooperation, not self-interest. It's people working together. And somehow Ayn Rand would talk about, she would point at the Chrysler building as like this amazing achievement of self-interest in capitalism. But it's like, lady, how many hundreds or thousands of people work together to put the Chrysler building together? Right? That was a group effort. It took tons of cooperation and coordination to make that marvel, just as it does every big project. Yep. It's not one person. It's not selfishness. It's absurd to say that.
Yeah, and then they give credit to the boss for writing the check. Yeah,
give me a break. We know the boss isn't doing all the most important work anyway.
I was going to end on that note. It's such a great way to, but like it's just like there's so many threads here I'm leaving open. But like that whole like ceremonial shovel moment that they do at like construction sites where the suits pretend to use a fancy shovel. There's something very sort of I don't know what the right phrase, but like just to ritualize the actual work.
Yeah.
But then that when the story gets told later, it might as well be that they're the ones who did all the work. It's like it just totally erases the workers' contributions and the value the workers actually brought, the risks that they took, the time their children didn't get to see their parents because they were gone, and all the downstream ways that everybody else sacrificed so that those fucking assholes with the polished gold shovel get to put a picture on their wall.
They'll take all the credit.
Yeah, of them wearing a clean hard hat. So kiss my ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I got so much to tell you. I just, I wish we could talk forever, but I feel like I've taken up so much of your time already. So we're about a minute or an hour 30.
Let's set it up and let's set up another one. I'd be happy to talk to you again, Hank.
Dude, totally. Maybe, not that I'm going to propose it right now. Well, I am about to, but I have this concept for a podcast called Socialism for Selfish Pricks Like You and Me. That I kind of want to do because it's like,
Okay.
I don't believe in the selfish stuff, but I kind of like the idea of starting from selfishness in order to sort of unwind American consumeristic and why is it okay to validate selfishness because we've all been conditioned, but then also talk about why I'm safer if my neighbors aren't stressed out and because they're safe.
Yeah.
You can be a socialist for selfish impulses, and it's kind of the thesis.
There you go.
So we gotta work with where we are. So all right, you want to hang out and watch Adam Curtis documentaries on Discord for the next 6 hours?
Oh, I appreciate the invitation, but I do have dinner plans with my wife.
Oh, okay, fine. Sounds like a little bit more interesting. So, dude, thank you so much. It's really been wonderful. Appreciate you taking a chance on a little podcast, and glad to have you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to talk to you, and I really appreciate you having me on your show.
All right, thanks. Let's make them pay on Substack, everybody.